Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. It's really, I don't even know what time it is in your time zone. I'm in Lourdes, dreaming. But thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are going to start with our prayer of the order. I will give some announcements, and then I will turn the floor over to Charles, who will introduce Father Scalia, and then we'll get on to our talk. So first, the prayer of the order in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord Jesus, thou hast seen fit to enlist me for thy service in the order of St. John of Jerusalem. I humbly entreat thee, through the intercession of the Most Holy Virgin of Palermo, of St. John the Baptist, Blessed Gerard, and all the saints, to keep me faithful to the traditions of our order. Be it mine to practice and defend the Catholic, the Apostolic, the Roman faith against sacrilege. Be it mine to practice charity towards my neighbors, especially the poor and the sick. Give me the strength I need to carry out this my resolve, forgetful of myself, learning ever from thy holy gospel a spirit of deep and generous Christian devotion, striving ever to promote God's glory, the world's peace, and all that may benefit the order of St. John of Jerusalem. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right. I have a few updates. I'm going to go through them quickly, but so let's see. The Missionaries of Charity, we are continuing to do the meals with the sisters down there. On Monday, Wednesdays, and Friday, we have people who are boxing up meals and giving them to the people who come to get them. Ted and Ann Zagrabelny have videotaped praying of the rosary for Arbor Terrace and the Virginians so that we can continue to keep contact with our the people that we serve there while we are sequestered. Today, we provided a meal for the residents at the Christ House. And today, we also took 527 pounds of food that we collected from members and took that out to the St. Lucie Project food collection. And that was organized by our candidate from 2021, Sergio Gore. So thank you. And thank you to all who participated in that. People donated food as well as financial or monetary donations. So we really, really appreciate that. Thank you. We've been praying the rosary every Sunday at 3 o'clock. Thank you to candidate Sal Dietrich for that. That's been amazing and wonderful and a great way to stay connected. We are working on letter writing to those we serve at nursing homes. Many people have joined the prison ministry, and I really thank you about that. There are so many people in prisons who would love connection with the outside, and I just got my first letter back from the person that I'm writing with, and it's going to be very, very interesting. God is good. And I have never done that before, so it's a new experience that I'm looking forward to. Our e-prayer group continues to, every Wednesday, Mary sends out the prayer intentions that we all have. Let's see, Prayer in Action, Bill Kelly and his committee is continuing to try and make connections through notes or calls to people within our order in our region who can benefit from notes or calls to stay connected to the order. We just had a group of 18 people finish the consecration to St. Joseph on May 1st. That was a very powerful experience for all of us. David Carradini is leading 2 study groups, one about St. Joseph and the other Louis de Montfort. So check your information. If you want to get involved, you can connect with him. And also, of course, the prayer intention we have right now is for the repose of the soul of our Grand Master Giacomo Dal Torre, who we have in the forefront of our mind, of course. And we pray that he pray for his repose of his soul, and that we can be under the leadership of who the Holy Spirit has intended for us. So I think that those are all the announcements for tonight, and I feel like I'm on a ship, but I will turn the floor over to Charles.
All right, thanks very much, Laura, and thanks very much to Father Scalia for having us here.
The helmsman.
Joining us. Exactly. And I will be introducing the Very Reverend Paul Scalia. I am the often here Reverend Charles McLaughlin. And it is a great privilege to be here. And we are very grateful to Father Scalia to talk to us about homosexuality and how we can think of it and how we approach this very challenging subject as Catholics. I'd like to introduce him first. I think most people on here know him. But Father Scalia grew up in the Diocese of Arlington and attended the College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts. And he studied theology at the Pontifical Gregorian University and the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas in Rome. Since his ordination in 1996, he served as parochial vicar in several parishes and a pastor of my former parish, St. John Beloved, which is an amazing parish. And great parish. You've carried that on. It has been carried on since you. He currently serves as the pastor of St. James Catholic Church. He is Episcopal Vicar for clergy in the diocese, directs the permanent diaconate program. He's written for various publications and is a frequent speaker on matters of faith and doctrine. Father Scalia is the author of 2 books that I know of. That Nothing May Be Lost, Reflections on Catholic Doctrine and Devotion, and Sermons in Times of Crisis, 12 Homilies to Stir Your Soul, both available on Amazon.
Both available on Amazon.
Yeah, that's right. And important for me and my family is that he gave the key homily when my son went to the Quo Vadis camp, and which has changed his life. And so,
Thanks be to God.
Yeah, that's great.
The camp.
Right. I'm not. With that, I'll turn it over to Father Scalia. The way we expect things to go tonight is Father Scalia will present to us for 20-30 minutes or so. I'll have a few questions, and then through Zoom with Laura helping moderate, we'll take your questions and hopefully have as much of a natural discussion as we can under the circumstances.
Great, thank you. So it's good to be with you, and if not actually with you, but virtually with you. We are in the library, St. James Church, and this is where we have our what we call rectory ramblings twice a week. And it's something that one of the parochial vicars and I started, and we just sit here and we talk about theological questions that people submit, and it's fun. So, and just one correction on that: I didn't write Sermons in Times of Crisis. It's a collection of homilies and sermons from throughout the church's history, and I just edited it and wrote an introduction. So, but it's a wonderful book because it gives a great sense of the preaching throughout the church's history. So so tonight this topic of homosexuality, which is in a sense, it's when I first started when I first got involved in this controversial issue back in 2002 or so, it was still really controversial, and that was before gay marriage was universally accepted or imposed on the country, and it's before really the culture kind of shifted, and so now it's kind of the Catholic Church is seen more and more as the outlier on this. Back when I first got involved, it was it is increasing in controversy, but back then most Democrats were still opposed to gay marriage. DOMA was still the law of the land, and so it wasn't the given that it's become now. And since the Obergefell decision, if you remember, the Obama White House, they lit up the White House in rainbow flag after the Obergefell decision imposing legalized gay marriage in all the states. And that was a real signal. And since then, things have really pivoted to the transgendered issue, which is isn't exactly the same issue, but obviously they're similar. So I've been asked to speak on this issue in a lot of different contexts and places. And the exchange usually goes something like, Father, will you come speak to our youth group or, this college group about homosexuality? And I say, no. I'll come and speak on human sexuality. And in that context, I will speak on homosexuality. And because it's not as though homosexuality is the only problem, the only point of confusion that our culture has on human sexuality. It's the entire culture is confused. It's not just that, everybody else is living lily white purity, and it's just, this one group that is misbehaving. No, it's the whole thing. So, now, I think this issue is of great importance because in working in this area, I've come to realize that it's really a touchstone for many other things. So just a brief history of how I got involved. You can file it under no good deed goes unpunished, right? So at a priest council meeting in 2001, I made the observation that we didn't have any group to help men and women who have same-sex attractions live chastity. That issue had just been brought to my attention in like the weeks before that meeting, and so I brought it up at the meeting and thought that would just be a nice contribution to the meeting, and I would leave it there. At the next meeting, Bishop Laverty appointed me chairman of an ad hoc committee to study the issue and propose something. And so I did, and some priests that you might know, assisted me with that. Father Pokorski, who's now at St. Catherine's, and Father Gould, who's now at St. Francis de Sales. They were my main sort of contacts in the diocese. But then I met with Father Harvey, who was the founder and at the time the chairman of Courage, and I met him. Actually, I met him with a good friend of mine, Father Paul Check, who went on to become the chairman of Courage. And Courage is really sort of the Catholic response to this, and it's the outreach to men and women who have homosexual attraction and want to live chastity. And it's a very modest goal, which is just to help them live chastity. So it's not, we don't take political positions, don't have, we don't write op-eds. It's just, we want to help people live chastity. It's a very modest goal. And so I started a chapter in Arlington in 2004, and I've been involved with Courage and with this outreach since then. And I was chairman of the board of Courage for some years. I just recently stepped down from that, although I'm still on the board. And so in doing this work and meeting with men and women who want to live chastity, running the meetings, I've come to know the issue a great deal. And one of the first things that I realized was people will reach out to anyone who's willing to talk about this, because a lot of clerics weren't willing to talk about it, and for various reasons, and not all of them bad. Well, probably all of them bad, but not all of them evil. Some because they didn't accept the church's teaching, but others because they maybe were uncomfortable or uncertain about things. They just didn't feel confident enough. And so that's just a brief thing about how I became involved in this, and it's been a great blessing in my life. I found that the men and women in Courage take the faith more seriously than most Catholics do, because as one Courage chaplain told me, a very old Paulist priest, he said, these men and women understand that if there is a loophole in the teaching, they'll be through it in an instant. Mm-hmm. And so they want their doctrine neat, undefiled, undiluted. And they like their liturgy traditional, and so that we have a Courage conference every year in the summer, and it's a really wonderful occasion, and it's men and women who really want strong teaching and beautiful liturgy, and I found them to be some of the most faithful Catholics, even though they continue to struggle. So I call this a touchstone issue because I think in dealing with this issue, what it brings up is a lot of the other things that we're facing as a culture and as a church. And the most obvious one is the truth about sexuality, about human sexuality. And I think, first of all, that there is a truth about human sexuality. And most people in our culture would say that, well, there is nothing true about it. It's just, whatever you want to be, you can be. Whatever you want to do, you can do. And the church has always made has always had the teaching that there's a truth to this. There's a truth to the way we live out this dimension of who we are. And it's, it's a very simple truth, isn't it? It's that human sexuality is ordered towards procreation and the union of spouses. And that is, it's twofold ends, and anything acting against those is immoral. It really is kind of that simple, which is not the same as easy, but it is that simple. And so it's, it's in that context that we should understand homosexuality, because when we say that human sexuality is ordered or designed towards a purpose, that means that our sexuality, that dimension of us that is sexual, right, is ordered or designed for a purpose. And in order for us to use it morally and in a way that is fulfilling, we have to observe that purpose. And anything that goes against that purpose is not only immoral, but of course makes us unhappy. And when we're unhappy because of things we've done, there are always two things that we can do. We can either repent and correct ourselves and get back on the right path, or we can double down and insist, and harden our hearts, basically. So, so it's within that context that we have to understand the church's teaching on homosexuality. I always like to go through what is really, it's in the catechism, and it's if you will, a three-layered approach to this issue, proceeding from, or if you think of it in a different, like concentric circles, going from the outermost to the innermost. And the outermost is homosexual actions and what the church teaches about that. And it's very, it's unpopular to say, it's a clunky phrase that the catechism uses, that homosexual activity or some homosexual acts are intrinsically intrinsically disordered, which sounds harsh, and it is strong. It's not a statement about the person, it's a statement about the actions. And it's not the only action that the church says is intrinsically disordered, right? Abortion, direct abortion, is intrinsically disordered. Means there's no context, no intention that can make it right. Just to be controversial, lying is intrinsically disordered. There's no context in which it's okay to deliberately contradict what you have in mind. And homosexual activity. Now, a lot of people take umbrage with that, especially our friend James Martin, SJ. It says that, and it is an awkward, it's a clunky term, right? It's not a soundbite for the popular media. It's a moral theology term. Something that is intrinsically disordered means that in no circumstances can it ever be justified or become licit. If a man and a woman have sex outside of marriage, that is immoral. If they have sex within marriage and for the proper reasons, then suddenly it's moral. It's the same action, but different context, different intentions. Homosexual activity is different. No context, no intentions can ever make it licit or moral. So that's the outermost circle, if you will. And then the moving inward is I think probably the trickiest part of this scenario, which is homosexual attractions. What does the church teach about this? And this is where most people really struggle. Whether it's the adolescent who has this sexual awakening and finds himself attracted to another guy, or a much older man who's felt this all his life. What is the moral content of that? What does the church teach about it? And the Catechism says that homosexual attractions are objectively disordered, which again is not a statement about the person. It's not a statement about the person's culpability or sanctity or goodness in any way. many of the men and women that I know in Courage who have homosexual attractions are very holy because they're striving to live the life of Christ in a heroic way. But when we say that the attractions are objectively disordered, we mean, first of all, this is an objective statement. It's not a statement about the person who is experiencing them. It's a statement about the objective truth of the attractions. And second, when we say it's disordered, we mean it has departed from the proper ordering of sexual desires. Because if human sexuality is meant to be male to female, female to male, then the attractions should follow that order, right? They should follow that design. And when attractions do not follow that design, they're disordered. The person might be a wonderful, holy person, but we can't say that the sexual attractions are suddenly okay just because the person's a good person. Mm-hmm. Now, here the difficulty here is that as we move into the core, to that third point, so we went from intrinsically disordered actions to objectively disordered attractions to the core of the church's teaching, which is the person. So remember, the first two rings or circles are not a statement about the person. They're a statement about the actions or the attractions. What does the church teach about the person? And of course, the church teaches that the person is good. The person is created in the image and likeness of God, redeemed by the blood of Christ, and if baptized, then made a member of Christ's body and called to sanctity. That's not bad, right? That's the church's view of the person who suffers from these attractions or even falls into these actions. So now the trickiest place is between the second and the third, as we go from the attractions to the person. Because a lot of the men and women who have same-sex attractions feel them so deeply that they feel that they are part of who they are. Mm-hmm. And so they say, well, this defines me. And I found that I don't argue with that, because I did once, and it was kind of, I can't believe I got away with it. I think one of the reasons I got away with it is because I knew the guy already. But he said to me, "Father, I'm gay," and I said, "No, you're not." And at which point I really had his attention, right? And he said, "No, I really am gay." I said, "No, you really are not." And the point I was making, and again, I don't do this typically. I could get away with it because I knew the guy already. The point I was making was that the attractions that he experienced, and that's what he meant by saying, "I am gay," the attractions that he experienced did not define who he is as a person. And but he felt them so deeply, and he had never felt any other kind of sexual attraction. So he as far as he could tell in his lived experience, this is part of who he is. And so really, I think this is the key work of the church is to make the distinction between the person and the attractions, and to say that the attractions are something that a person might experience, but they do not define the person. And somebody like James Martin will want to say that the attractions define the person. I find that to be something that limits the person and sort of puts the person in a box, in a little category. And one of the things in this ministry, in this work, is that I discovered that there's no such thing as just gay or homosexual. That every person experiences this differently, and our culture would like it to be, LGBTQ, and the Q is hilarious because it's the acknowledgement that the LGBT don't fit every circumstance, right? And so what we've discovered is once you depart from heterosexual, it's not that you're only going to have 2 or 3 orientations. You're going to have as many as you have people. And the Q is sort of and then the plus, you see that LGBTQ plus, that's even more of an acknowledgement that we just don't know. It'd be more honest to say human sexuality is oriented. It is ordered in a particular way. And anything that departs from that is disordered. I'm not saying anything about the person. The person might be a wonderful person. But the attractions have now left the proper orientation. So they, in a sense, they're disoriented, which is why, I don't think it's helpful to speak of homosexual orientation,
Right.
because there's really only one sexual orientation, male to female, female to male. That this is, our bodies reveal this truth. Jay Budiszewski is a great author, great natural law author. He's used this device. It's pretty clever. To ask a crowd of people, and if we were all together, I would do this. How many of you have a reproductive system? And it's always kind of fun to do that, because the women all raise their hands, right? Because when we hear reproductive health, it's women's health, right? And men kind of hesitantly raise their hands because they know they have something to do with reproduction, but well, and of course the answer is no one has a reproductive system. It is the union of man and woman that is the reproductive system, and so that speaks just on a biological level of the complementarity of man and woman. And another way of approaching this is to observe that in the human body, every organ, every member of the human body is explained by observing just one person or one body, right? And examining that one body, or dissecting it, right? The exception to the rule is human genitalia. That is an organ of the human body that is inexplicable. It cannot be scientifically or medically understood apart from its complement. It cannot be understood except in relation to a member of the opposite sex. And so already in our bodies, this complementarity is written in there. And we just say, well, that's an indication of what is true about us. So, which brings me to kind of another way this is a touchstone issue, not just human sexuality in general. It speaks to kind of confusion there. And I should mention also, Pat Fagan years ago described contraception as the homosexualization of heterosexual sex, which is a really kind of bold term. Martin Luther apparently called contraception heterosexual sodomy, which is even more shocking. He used colorful language, right? But the point being that what contraception does is it eliminates what is distinctive about man and woman, which is the capacity to procreate.
Right.
And so once that is eliminated, then sexuality is then confused. And so it's no coincidence that the kind of homosexual movement really came into being right about the same time that contraception became widely available and approved, because it just reflective of just a general confusion and misunderstanding about sexuality. And then and so this speaks to also it talks about complementarity, human sexuality, the embodied soul. Who are we as human persons? And there is a discomfort that you find a lot of times with the human body. And, we have people have eating disorders, they have, poor body image, things like that. And a lot of that is it seems unique to our culture and our time. For most of history, people didn't have the time to have a poor body image. But also, we are more and more disconnected from our bodies. I mean, even this whole thing here,
right?
This is weird. This is just a stopgap, right? This is not real communication. This is, right? But this is just a stopgap. Probably the dominant thought about the human person in our culture is that the human person is a soul in a body, right? Which is wrong. We are an embodied soul. We're not a soul that's rattling around in a material body. We are a soul that gives life and is one organism with the body. Once we lose sight of that, then a lot of things. Well, this is really what's behind the transgender movement. Is this radical separation of body and soul, so that people can say, I am psychologically one thing and physically another. And now I have to I have to mutilate my body in order to be in accord with my psyche, my soul. And so this issue, homosexuality, I think, but even more so, transgender ideology, it speaks to this confusion about who we are, and it speaks to the importance of the church's ancient teaching on the embodied soul, that the importance of the body, that the body reveals to us something about who we are. Of course, this is the burden of John Paul II's theology of the body, that the body is not just an instrument, but it is a sacrament. It is an outward sign of an inward reality. So this is kind of the confusion that we're left with today. Is people don't know what to do with the body. We either hate it, or we either hate it and therefore abuse it, or we idolize it. And there's not much in between. In one of his last addresses, December 22nd, 2012, I think it is, Pope Benedict gave a great talk. It was his annual Christmas greetings to the Roman Curia, which I always look forward to reading those because they're brilliant, always brilliant. And but he, in typical Ratzinger style, he zeroed in on really what is the crux of this whole issue. And he said it all comes down to a matter of whether or not we are created. Mm-hmm. Whether we receive our created nature from a creator, or we invent who we are. And especially with the transgender ideology, the insistence is, I get to create who I am. I get to decide it. And I think we see this also in the radical, like tattooing and body piercing. Mm-hmm. I'm going to make this of what I want. It's something for me to just manipulate. Will we accept being created? And so my friend Father Chaco, I know some of you have met. He was director of Courage for some years, and he and I have an ongoing exchange. He started to say that the most controversial passage in Scripture is He created them male and female. And I said, no, the most controversial passage in Scripture is He created them. Right? I mean, and we keep pushing it back further, and that's why I think this is such an important issue, is because it really does bring us back to almost the most basic principle. Are we creatures of the Creator? Or are we going to insist on our own, that we get to create ourselves, we get to decide what the body is meant for, we get to decide what sexuality is for? And so that is, that's why I think it's such an important topic, and why I call it a touchstone for many, many other controversies. Some years ago, we at Courage put together a movie called Desire of the Everlasting Hills, and it's kind of a slick produced movie, and it was very good. And it was a story of 3 of our members and how they got into the homosexual lifestyle, how they got out. And Courage isn't even mentioned in the movie. The Catholic Church is in the background. Priests look great because they're just confessors, But it really, what was interesting about that movie is that it brought, I would show that to groups who wanted to discuss this issue, but what they discovered was that a lot of the things that were raised in the movie spoke to their own struggles, and they weren't struggling with homosexuality. But it was things like, what's the truth about my body? What's my relationship with my body? How do I treat it? How do I regard it? Or what does it mean to be a son, a daughter, a friend? What makes for an authentic relationship? These are all things that are sort of caught up in this ministry and apostolate. And so I think for the work of the church, there's really two main efforts, and the first is, of course, to teach what is true, and so to teach what is true about the human person as created body and soul, about the complementarity of man and woman, about the design and the order of human sexuality, to teach that truth, because people starve for lack of true doctrine. And then, but that's not enough. And this is why years ago I raised that point at the Priest Council. It's not enough just to have a teaching. It's not a good shepherd who gives a teaching but doesn't give a way to live it.
Mm.
So, in fact, this Sunday's Gospel, our Lord says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." He doesn't just say, "I'm the truth." He says, I'm the way. In other words, he's revealing himself to them as the pathway for life. So he's teaching them how to live what he is revealing. And so, yes, we have to teach what is true. That is the foundation of everything. But then the other part is helping people to live this reality. And that requires a lot of patience and biting our tongues sometimes and having difficult conversations at other times. But it's a work that is very important and worthwhile. I'll tell you that the men in our Courage group who've really persevered, who've been in the group for a long time, I've heard several of them speak of how this struggle has made them better Catholics, and which shows, I think, a great deal of spiritual maturity is to realize that it is in the course of struggling that I become holy. It's not when I'm done struggling, then God will make me holy. No, it's in the course of it. One of these men, actually, at one of our meetings, he said, "I thank God for my same-sex attractions," which is shocking and shocked everybody at the meeting. And it needs to be understood properly. And I think the proper way to understand it is in terms of what St. Paul says in 2 Corinthians 12, when he says, I thank God for all of these things that befallen me. He goes on to list all of the struggles and everything. Not that those things in themselves are good, and not that same-sex attractions in themselves are good, but that these things become the occasion of seeking and finding what Christ has to give, and that's a great spiritual lesson for everybody to learn, right? So I'll end there. Open it up for questions. Okay.
Okay. Well, there's lots of things to talk about and lots of sort of onions to peel. So on that, I guess my first question on that second ring.
Yeah.
Right. So objectively disordered desires, right?
Mm-hmm. Or passions or attractions.
So so it would similarly be would it be similarly an objectively disordered desire for a married person to feel a strong attraction to someone outside of his marriage?
Not really. If a man feels an attraction to another woman, well, it's still heterosexual. It's still reflective of the complementarity of man and woman. It's the context that makes his attraction to that woman wrong. So it's not in itself wrong for him to feel that. Okay, it is the context in which he experiences that I think would make it wrong.
Okay,
but in a different context, if you were not married and you were attracted to the same woman, be fine.
Right. I think one of the areas that I'm kind of going this with is sort of the nature of human sexuality, and I think you've described it especially well. There's all these surveys that have been out recently that sort of show a bell curve of how people experience attractions across our broad population and our secular culture, that sort of show that people who have entirely exclusive attractions to either the same sex or the opposite sex are pretty small tails, and most people are kind of mixed up.
Right.
If that's true, is that just a manifestation of our concupiscence, and our human sexuality after the fall is messy?
Yeah, and I think
it's our job to sort of sort it out.
Exactly, and I think that's and I think this is where I think you put it well, is that since the fall, because of our disordered desires and because our passions are not in accord with the truth, it shouldn't surprise us at all that not everybody experiences exclusive attractions to the opposite sex. That's actually very much in keeping with our theology, with what we understand to be the effect of the fall upon us, and what it means to live a fallen human nature. Is that yeah, my desires don't always go in the right direction, and this is why we need teaching to guide our desires properly. And also, I think this is the importance of understanding the body as capable of teaching us something. And who always guesses is children, right? It's like you say that two men can't have babies, and they start laughing, going, "Yeah, it's stupid. Men can't have babies," but it really is it is that simple. No, it shouldn't be put in a simplistic or condescending way, but it really is that simple. Is that the body does reveal to us the direction in which our sexual desires should go. And so if those are not in accord, that actually kind of vindicates Catholic teaching.
Right.
We kind of say, well, yeah, we're not surprised they're not in accord. That's the effect of sin, right?
Right.
And so, but we find that they're not in accord. We don't immediately go with just the emotion. In any instance, never mind homosexuality, just for anything, we don't go default to the emotion. And this is this is touching another issue, which is the proper ordering of the passions. And St. Thomas is very clear that the passions desire to be subject to reason. They desire it. And so, because the passions, when they are properly ordered, they realize their purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, the other area you talked about for a while is the question.
Let's go back to this point, because those who say, they look at the bell curve, right, and they say, see, nobody, virtually nobody, or very few people, right, have this exclusive heterosexual attraction. Okay. If we follow that to its logical conclusion, they say, see, it means nothing. There is no such thing as sexual orientation. If we take this, kind of like, Nietzsche, who's always following modern philosophy, off the edge of the cliff. If we follow this to off the edge of the cliff, that means, okay, then sex means absolutely nothing. The body means nothing. Okay, well, let's follow that to its conclusion. That's absolute chaos. And nobody really wants that.
So the way, for what it's worth, the way I react to that is, if we're only talking as our secular society talks about sexual orientation, that's kind of right. The claims, legal and otherwise, about sexual orientation sort of fall apart if you look at them closely enough.
Right.
And only through the teaching of the church and through natural law do we find what the real orientation is.
Right. And I would say, and this is why Jay Budiszewski is very, very good on this. His book, I think it's called The Meaning of Sex. But he articulates this teaching without bringing in God, which is kind of a weird thing to hear from a priest. But it's good to be able to make those arguments, in the public square. Because once you say, well, Leviticus says this, people, that's it, you're done with. But when you can just make the argument from what everybody experiences, which is always the strongest argument, right? Let's begin with what everybody knows. I think we all know that we want the body to mean something. We want that. And one way I like to explain it is that in order for something to have meaning, it has to have limits. The example I use is a priest in a parish far, far away, who years ago, it was Mother's Day. So it was years ago this coming Sunday. Since it was Mother's Day, he said, it's Mother's Day. And at the end of Mass, he said, we're going to have a special blessing for all mothers. And that's meaningful, isn't it? Because it's limited. And then he said, and for all grandmothers. Okay, well, still meaningful, still limited, but they were in the first category, weren't they? Right? And then he said, and for anyone who has a mother. Now it's no longer meaningful,
right?
Because now it's everybody. in order for things to have meaning, they have to be bounded by something. It has to be this, not that. In order for human sexuality to have meaning, in order for the body to have meaning, there must be some limits to it. It must be this, not that. And once we remove all of the limits and the boundaries, now all of a sudden people claim freedom, but they're really just, sort of wasting away. They haven't achieved meaning. They've lost it entirely. And the fact that that people still desire that meaning is, I think, indicated in somebody like Bruce Jenner, who becomes Caitlyn Jenner. Lo and behold, he always thought he was a woman, but not just a woman, but a particular kind of woman. In other words, I mean, in his mind, he had very much a binary, image in mind. He didn't have he just wanted to be a woman, but go on and being what he was before. No, he had a complementarity understanding of woman in his mind. And that's typically true. So.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted to go back to, the discussion about identity.
Yeah.
And that,
which is very much at the core of all of this.
yes.
Yeah.
And how, I've had friends or colleagues who saw themselves as gay and explained to me very carefully, this isn't just about my attraction. This is my identity. This is who I am.
Right.
And which is a pretty recent thing that's become defined that way.
Right.
And now there's so many sort of slices of those sorts of identities. And I think like this, and many other questions I might get to are, what's your advice for how we navigate the world,
right,
and be true to what we think is true, but in order to have even the closest discussion about any of these issues, or to say why I don't want to wear a gay pride pin during
right,
June,
when my boss is telling me to.
There's a 2-hour discussion about anthropology and the nature of the human person and everything else. How would you advise us to navigate that?
Well, let me just first note, beware of the shifting narrative. So one narrative is, this is not just about my sexual attractions, this defines me, and sort of everything about my life. But there's another narrative out there, which is, we're just like everybody else. We just happen to be attracted to members of the same sex. Well, okay, well, which one is it? It's either a completely defining thing, and you're a different kind of person, or you're just like everybody else, you just happen to do things different physically. It can't be both those narratives. And those, so it's kind of the shifting sands there, narrative. So I think beware of that, first of all. We're not called to tolerate, we're called to love. Toleration is it's a much easier thing. Would that he had said, tolerate one another as I tolerated you. But he calls us, tolerate your enemies. But he's called us to love, which means, of course, as we know, to will the good of the other. And the difficulty arises when you want what is good for the other person more than the other person wants what's good. And I think that's the situation you fall into. A lot of this is going to depend on how well you know the person. What's your, what's the kind of relationship that you have? Can you have that conversation with the person? And another question is, how radicalized is the person? Because sometimes people will, I know a lady who, she worked for years with a guy who was he's openly gay, he's living with his partner and everything like that. And they worked together on projects together for years. And she was devout Catholic, daily communicant, and they never talked about this. They both knew, right, that this is kind of like a huge fault line in their friendship. And as the years went by, he just had some sort of kind of conversion in his life, and he didn't want to be active anymore. And of course, that meant the end of him with his relationship and his whole gay community. And he turned to this Catholic woman that he knew. And it was just by kind of keeping him on the line and being kind to him and not making an issue of it, that she was able to kind of be there for him. So it's hard to give a one-size-fits-all, because it's going to depend so much on what's the kind of relationship that you have with the person. Some people will try to radicalize things and insist that you accept them. Others will be fine if you don't. I think some things that are clear is that you cannot act or speak in such a way that you convey approval of things. And that's the woman that I just mentioned. She was very careful not to, lend approval, but approve what you can, but not you can't go to gay weddings. It's your presence there is a tacit endorsement of these things, and that would be wrong. And it would be unfair to the person, because it would give the person the sense that you think this is okay, and you don't. So this is where the virtue of prudence is going to come in very very strongly, because okay, what is the particular situation here to be addressed?
Well, and then similarly, what's your advice on dealing with it in work situations where we're subject to authority? Of course, we live in Washington, so many of us are under the government. There's
very difficult thing.
There's law, there's application of law, and especially with the new laws in Virginia.
The SOGI legislation that just went through, right?
Yes.
Or it's going through.
It's going through, but there's, as Andrew Sullivan says, they're coming for us, and
some have been open about that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just sort of how does somebody who has a duty to do to our employer or to the government, when what the government's doing is in variance with what we know to be true, how do we sort of seek to navigate that?
So years ago, I was meeting with this elderly courage chaplain, and he said that he would say to people who came to him about courage, his opening line was, "You must be willing to suffer." And not surprisingly, people actually flocked to him because of that honesty. Well, I think trying to kind of skate by as best we can. I think Thomas More is a great example in this. He didn't pick a fight with Henry VIII. He tried to avoid it. He tried everything he could do to avoid that confrontation with the king without compromising his principles. And it was only by way of perjury that they were able to get him. So I think it's an important thing to keep in mind, is that we shouldn't go looking for it. Okay. And second, I think in a response to an employer or boss is, I shouldn't be forced to endorse or believe things that are contrary to my faith. And so that's one way. And I know this is a huge problem if you do not vociferously support Gay Pride Day or month, right? Then that could be a problem. And I think that is a point at which you begin making a stink, and perhaps legally, because I don't know what legal grounds you can do that on. Right. The difficulties become if your colleague Christopher comes in as Christine one day and wants to be called Christine, mm-hmm. and her and she. Now what do you do?
Well, love that person first.
Well, love that person first, and part of loving that person is not indulging that person in what is wrong. If I love you, I'm not going to indulge your thought that the moon is made of blue cheese, right? So it's a very difficult. I wish I had easy answers for these. This is why you guys out in the world are really on near the sphere.
Well, I think that's there are no easy answers. We have to erase the cross.
Well, and the charity and clarity. Those there are two watchwords in courage. Is charity and clarity. Those things always have to go hand. It is charity. It is authentic love to be clear about the truth. But in order for the truth to be spoken clearly, it needs to be done out of love.
So I'll ask one more question, then turn it over to others who might come from the virtual floor.
Okay.
Which is exactly that. So I've been known to look at various church-related videos on the internet, and so speaking of people seeking, who I think are seeking to seek the truth, but probably do it more stridently. So, for instance, like church militant.
Yeah.
What's your advice on how we take in this information or think about people who might be saying, have the right idea or saying the right words, but maybe doing it in such a way as to distract from the love that we ought to feel?
Yeah, I think, what's the purpose of those things, of those outlets? Because listen, we know it's bad. We know it's bad. We know the milk is sour. We don't have to keep smelling it, right? And I find, both in my own personal life, because I'm not immune to smelling the sour milk, but also just working with people in the parish, it seems to be very, very disrupting and disquieting to the spiritual life, but to no good end. Because at the end of the day, what can I do about these things? So I've become upset, and I've become angry about something that practically speaking, I can't really do anything. I mean, I can pray about it and what I should do, and that's what I should do, but I'm too angry to pray about it. I want to go, punch somebody in the face. And that's what I find. I know that's happened to me, and I find that happens to a lot of people. They get anxious and angry about things by, church militants and other websites. But I don't see that it's ever been turned to good. And it has never led to a quieting and a peacefulness in the soul. That's not the example that we see in the saints. What we see is simply a desire to worship God better and to serve Him better in the face of evil. So we know things are bad, and we should have that proper anger. Again, Thomas Aquinas says that anger is the passion that departs reason the most quickly, because anger is perhaps one of the most necessary, because it's ordered towards self-preservation. But for that reason, it can slip the leash of reason really quickly, and that's not healthy for us.
No, it's very helpful, and something I've been thinking about.